Welcome to Lyme Time. I'm Allie from the Tick Chicks. We are all more than Lyme disease and chronic illness, and together we stand with you to overcome and rise. I'll bring you closer to the experts in cutting-edge treatments and even a few unexpected ways of healing. I'll ask the questions you want answers to regarding Lyme disease and successful ways of getting you closer to 100%. We are in this together and will not be defined by Lyme.
Welcome to Lyme Time, and today my very special guest is Dr. Bill Rawls, who is going to be sharing a great opportunity with me to talk about my own personal story. And as I was going through, I've recorded my story before, but I wanted to re-record it for those who are new and also for things I've learned since I first recorded about 3 years ago. So I thought it would be wonderful to have Dr. Rawls here. And as I go through my journey, he can talk about the medical side of things and also things that I might be experiencing as a patient, his opinion on as a physician. So welcome, Dr. Rawls. I'm so happy to have you.
Well, thank you, Allie. We all have a journey. And we learn. It's a learning experience. And, I didn't see that early on. I was just angry in the beginning that all these things were happening to me. But when it turned around to be a learning experience, how can we make it better and how can we use this information to help other people? Then that journey had more value. And that was a big key part of me overcoming those hurdles and getting well too. So yes, sharing your journey, analyzing it, looking at these different parts, I think is really valuable.
It's great to have you. I feel like we're friends now. We've been together at a retreat and spoken to people together and shared our stories. And for those of you who don't know, Dr. Bill Rawls is the founder of Vital Plan, and he is very active on through their website and also through Instagram, amongst others, I'm sure. And he's also the author of Unlocking Lyme and the Cellular Wellness Solution. And Unlocking Lyme was actually one of my very, very first books that I picked up about Lyme disease once I had the diagnosis. And it remains in my library, and I refer to it all the time. It's like, you guys, if you don't have it, you have to get it. It's like a Lyme disease Bible and reference manual, and you can pretty much find anything you need through that book. As well as, some herb, he goes into the herbs as well. And that has just been so helpful. It's really been a lifeline for me. So I thank you for that, Dr. Rawls. And Dr. Rawls also has recovered from cardio, Lyme, I'm drawing the blank right now, Lyme carditis. And that was a real harrowing episode for him to go through right in the middle of his flourishing medical career. So he really did use what he learned through his own journey and said, okay, now I'm going to look at the whole medical system and healing in a completely different way. And for him, it was a radical change, moving from allopathic medicine into herbals. Do you want to share any more about that, Dr. Rawls?
Well, yeah, again, it's all a learning experience. And, part of my therapy has been writing, of taking down this information and putting it into books. So Unlocking Lyme was a stage in my journey when I was really starting to look at Lyme disease differently than I think a lot of either conventional or people in the Lyme community. And then the Cellular Wellness Solution was kind of taking that a step further and recognizing that this epidemic of Lyme disease we're having is really about an epidemic of chronic illness all across the country. And it's because we have so many forces. I mean, there's like we've been in a storm for about a couple of decades now. It's not just global warming, it's all the petrochemicals and all of the other things. And these are things that are affecting us at the cellular level, but recognizing the value of cellular health. So, so many people think of Lyme disease as an invasion of a bacteria and we get sick because of the bacteria. And that's true with an acute infection. But not that many people are really struggling with the acute infection. It's what we identify as chronic Lyme disease. And when you look at that when it becomes chronic, when any infection, whether it's chronic Lyme, long COVID, or any of the other things out there that I think we're making connections to with autoimmunity and everything else, it's a dysfunction that the cellular level of the body, the cellular immune system isn't managing these bacteria, these microbes like it should be. So we never clear it. We don't get rid of it. So at that point, it's not about just killing the microbe. It's about restoring our defense systems to the point that we can get them that we're well. And looking at my journey with the heart issues, something I've come to appreciate recently. I consider myself in robust good health now. But I was talking to you. We were talking before we started the show about learning new sports, and I'm learning something called wing foiling, which requires upfront a lot of strength and stamina. And I just don't have the stamina that I used to. But I did have very severe heart involvement, and I've realized it gets down to those cellular functions. So my body is healthy, my muscles are healthy. I keep myself in good health with good health habits and herbs and all of these things. And my heart is healthy, but I came to realize I don't have the heart muscle that I did before Lyme. I killed off a lot of heart cells. So I have a capacity that I can't get over. I kind of hit a wall at a certain point, and it's not because my cells aren't healthy or I have active infection or anything else. It's because I just don't have the cells that I used to. So I have to work within that. So we all have these limits that we have to live with. But recognizing that, understanding that from a cellular point of view has really been an interesting part of the journey.
Yes. And that second book of yours is truly, oh my gosh, it could help anybody in any situation. And it almost works as though it's a dictionary. If you've got something that pops up for yourself, you can just turn to that chapter in the book and read everything you need to know about that. So I love that part of your new book, and it's just so helpful to so many. And then just reflecting on what you just said, Lyme carditis affects the heart. Neurological Lyme affects more brain tissue, and we're talking about long-term. All of a sudden, we're talking about long-term COVID, and the CDC is recognizing long-haul Lyme disease or post-Lyme disease treatment syndrome, and whatever you want to call it, it's all basically the same, which is to say we don't have the ability to heal in the way that we used to post disease. And all of these things are very, very important. And important to note, I think I should say that the CDC is recognizing post-treatment Lyme disease, or what we would call chronic Lyme. And I think they now have said, they've put a number on it, in about 30% of cases of Lyme disease. Now, I think it might be higher than that, but if you think about those people, then now the long haul COVID people and all of these things that we're left with in the aftermath, there's a lot of people out there that are hurting and dealing with long-term effects. So both of your books are so imperative.
Well, I pulled a study the other day that they told it was kind of a play on long COVID to say long colds. And because there's so many viruses out there that we're exposed to, and we don't necessarily get rid of them. And if your system isn't healthy, if your cells aren't healthy, you can have long-term symptoms with these things. And so, yeah, a big part of my message is it's not just Borrelia. It's not just COVID. It's like they're just, there are over 200 different cold viruses that we know of, and there are probably a whole lot more than that. And some of them, quite frankly, are worse than COVID is now.
Mm.
And so it's really important to keep our guard up with herbs and doing all these things.
Sure. Well, let's get into it. I will I'm going to share a little bit about my own journey.
All right.
That is now, okay, from the beginning of my journey until today, it's been 11 years. So I first started having those symptoms 11 years ago. And that is when it began. And my very, very first symptoms were my feet had burning pain in them. It's like I woke up and I thought I broke a bone in my foot. I even went to the ER. It was acute, sharp pain in one of my feet, and then went to the ER, nothing, of course. And I was so confused by this. I could barely walk. I couldn't really tie my shoes because if I tied them, if they felt too tight on my feet, they were in a lot of distress and a lot of pain. And the pain kind of went from one foot to the other foot at the same time. So it was like a couple weeks later, maybe a month later, all of a sudden I had it in 2 feet. So what I thought might have been a hairline fracture that they missed actually that's when I started getting worried. And I remember for a good 2 to 3 years, I had to take out the insoles to all of my shoes and take out any extra padding because the slightest bit of cushion would disrupt that. So as a result of that, I saw a podiatrist. The first podiatrist was terrible and recommended lots and lots of Advil, which, as you know, Advil is horrible for nerve pain. It actually wears down the nerves if you take enough of it. And the second podiatrist basically ran scans and MRIs and all of that and looked at me finally and said, I can't do anything for you. I think this is all nerve related. You need to go see a neurologist. So that was my beginning phase of really understanding something terrible was beginning to happen and brew within my body. And before that, I was an avid, go to spin class 4 or 5 times a week. And I think it just got me in my weakest point, in my sort of like weakest link of my armor, which were my feet. I had had a previous surgery in my foot. And I think that's just where it wanted to settle in the beginning. Yeah. And then I went to 2 neurologists, and I'll go through all of that. But what are some of the early signs that you see with people when they come to you?
That one is really common, and I definitely had it. Yeah, burning feet. I had it. It's just a really common complaint. And I have to, in the second book, I get back to really defining what a symptom is. And we have symptoms kind of for a reason. And it's all about cells. Our whole body is made of cells. Everything that happens in the body is cellular. And if you have a symptom, that's a reflection of cellular stress or damage or injury. So when cells are damaged, injured, they release substances that activate nerves and send a message to the brain to say, okay, something's wrong here. So whether it's a pain in your foot, a pain in your heart, wherever, that's a sign of cellular stress or distress. And so it's important to recognize that just blocking that symptom isn't necessarily going to solve the problem. You have to really get to the root of the cellular stress. So burning feet is really common. And so there's more, though, than just damage to the feet and damage to those cells. So it's also damage to the nerves that are transmitting that message. So different bacteria. There's so many things going on with chronic Lyme that are beyond just specific bacteria. There's just a lot of things that become reactivated in our system. But trying to pull out some of these things, we know that Bartonella invades cells that line blood vessels and scavenges red blood cells. So it tends to damage small blood vessels in certain areas in the body. So we get stretch marks, but we also know that it can cause damage in our foot. And our feet are very sensitive. We walk on them, our feet take a pounding. So those blood vessels and the cells around them become injured. But also we know that Borrelia and many other microbes actually invade nerves to scavenge the myelin around the nerve. So it's basically just short circuits that. And we have the area in the brain that can be affected so that that impulse is prolonged or accentuated. So it's all the way up the pathway. But it is a symptom. And most of the symptoms, when what we do from a conventional medical point of view is we try to block the symptom. We use drugs to inhibit the symptom. And sometimes early on, some drugs, gabapentin, Lyrica, others can help interrupt that so we don't feel it quite as much. But there are always side effects because you're still not addressing the problems so people aren't getting well. And that's a really big deficiency with conventional medicine is we're not fixing things. We're just blocking it so we don't feel it anymore.
Yeah.
So, with the herbs, we're actually addressing the invasive microbes and we're addressing the cellular stress. So, herbs work on many levels. Not only are they suppressing these reactivated microbes that occur in different parts of the body, but we're also protecting cells from free radicals. We're balancing hormones, and we're doing a lot of things throughout the body to reduce cellular stress so recovery can occur. But it takes time. I had the burning feet for literally years before it resolved, along with all of my other symptoms.
It's real.
But
it's
it gradually
real.
did.
And I have heard that it is a fairly common starting point for so many people. And of course, it went to my hands, and I considered it was peripheral neuropathy. I had trouble opening bottles of water or turning on the shower, for instance. Still not knowing what was going on with my body. So off I went. I just kind of kept trying. I just entered a state of confusion. Yeah. And this was what I consider stage 1 of my Lyme disease, which is an acute, undeniable, debilitating stage of Lyme disease or tick-borne illness, I would say. And yes, I was prescribed gabapentin from one of the neurologists that actually did help me get through the most of the acute state, which lasted for me for about 4 years, I would say. And I did that from time to time. But again, still not addressing the root issue. I had trouble walking. I had twitching pain under I could see the nerves twitching like popcorn under my skin, which was not nice. I had hair loss, and I had the debilitating fatigue that we all talk about. It's much more than just being tired. It's hard to get out. It's hard to make it from your bed to the bathroom or to even the other side of the room or your closet. I saw a fibromyalgia and lupus specialist who definitively told me I did not have fibromyalgia. He has written several books on the topic, but that was one of the things that one of the neurologists diagnosed me with, and also diagnosed me with what they called a pain disorder. So still nothing to go by, still state of confusion. And then I entered this stage of acute symptoms where I noticed that the pain would lodge somewhere in my body, and then a month or two later it would lodge somewhere else. So
Yeah.
for a while, it was like I could tell I was having trouble swallowing anything, pills, water. It was in my throat. Then it would lodge in my kidney area. Then
Yeah.
it was lodging in my hands, where I could barely, and it just sort of felt like it was migrating
Yeah.
around my body. Do you know anything about that? Because
Well,
I
that's
still
that.
didn't have a
Yeah,
diagnosis at that point.
that's pretty much something that most people have, is this migrating pain and discomfort that is just kind of part of the whole thing. And I, I had so many of the symptoms. It's looking back on it, it's like fate, God, whoever, whatever, gave me these symptoms so I would learn from them, so I would actually be able to have sympathy and empathy for other people that were going through this. So I had all of those things too. So, but it was simultaneous with, the most scary thing was my heart, skipped beats, chest pain, all of these things. I had a cardiac cath, and was kind of on, before I reached a point where I was just done with conventional medicine, but I was kind of one step away from a pacemaker. But I also had the burning feet and all the paresthesias and everything that you're talking about. So on top of the heart, I'm going, do I have MS? And everybody does that, do we have MS? And it's, I just pulled a number of studies, several studies yesterday, looking at the presence of Borrelia and the connection to MS. We've also connected MS with chlamydia, Epstein-Barr, mycoplasma, other microbes. And I don't think it's one. I think it's a lot of these things all together. But I don't think you can explain MS without that microbe factor. And I think that's really important. But unless you check all the boxes, you don't get the diagnosis. And the fibromyalgia thing, that guy was being pretty specific about the defined diagnosis of fibromyalgia. But I actually pulled a study that 70% of people that end up with a diagnosis of fibromyalgia don't actually meet the formal criteria. And it just illustrates this huge problem we have with this concept of diagnosis. You have this diagnosis, but you don't have this diagnosis. And I realized, when you look at chronic illness, the value of a diagnosis is defining medical therapy. And medical therapy addresses the manifestations of illness, symptoms, inflammation, hormone imbalances chiefly. So, but those are the outward signs of the illness. They're not the underlying causes, and there are no drugs that really address those underlying causes. So it's not surprising that most people with defined as any chronic illness never get well, because we're not actually addressing that problem that starts at the cellular level. We're not getting there. Drugs don't have that capacity. But I've kind of given up that concept of diagnosis. I mean, so many people put so much emphasis on it. And you have to be really sick to get a diagnosis, and most people aren't sick enough. So they kind of end up in a quasi category, or they just start making up new diagnoses because you have to have a code for the patient to get paid. So
yeah,
that concept of diagnosis for chronic illness just doesn't work very well. I want to know why the patient is sick at the cellular level and what we need to do to restore that. And the migrating thing that you're talking about is really common because, you think about it, what we're having here is not an acute invasion of new bacteria into your body. This concept of dormancy is really important. And this is something I've been exploring for 5 or 10 years now. This idea that we pick things up through our lifetime. Epstein-Barr, mycoplasma, chlamydia, Borrelia, tick-borne microbes. And if we're healthy, these things can become embedded in our tissues throughout our body. And when a particular area of cells are weakened, these things that are dormant inside our cells reactivate. So I'm looking at it and going, I think all chronic illnesses are actually reactivation syndromes of microbes that are there, and they've often been there for a very long time, even some from someone's early childhood. And then those cells get stressed and they reactivate. And so it reactivates in one area. Well, the immune system attacks those cells, and so you have some damage from that can lead to autoimmunity. But finally, that area kind of quiets down, and then you have other areas that are stressed for one way or another, so it pops up somewhere else. And it may be that you just stretched that elbow wrong, or you twisted your neck wrong, and it caused enough cellular stress to allow that reactivation. So we end up chasing those things around, but that is just become it's a really key part of not only chronic Lyme, but a lot of chronic illnesses.
Yeah, I've actually just expanded my Facebook support group that has over 800 people there as of today to incorporate chronic illness, because I feel that there's so much chronic illness out there. Who cares what it's labeled? I mean, if it's Lyme, if it's RA, if it's whatever it is, I mean, it's very similar. People have very, very similar stories. And you're right. I do think that a lot of this is reactivation. And I will say that at this time in my journey, when I was having so much trouble walking, that thought did cross my mind as well. MS. I find that there's probably a very fine line between lupus, MS, and Lyme disease. And now they're finding Alzheimer's and so many other conditions that are all just about a hair apart from each other that separates them. And that was, to me, when I was getting tested for ALS and MS and lupus and all of that, and those tests at the time took 2 to 3 weeks to get results. And during that time was maybe my darkest time, because I was so filled with fear and anxiety and couldn't really walk. And then I was like constantly, was I dragging my toe? Was I dragging my feet? Because that's one of the hallmarks of MS. And I was constantly worried and panicked, and I couldn't sleep. I was overtired, and I was in such a state of fight or flight that it really just made everything worse. And I just recently, so that would be probably 10, 11 years ago that happened to me. I just recently released that fight or flight, and it lingered on for years and years, even after I was feeling better, and even after I was doing well. That was my last stage of getting better. But as a result of all this, I then entered a second phase, which is where, I was having so much nerve pain that it was hard for me to drive my vehicle. And so pushing on the brakes and doing all this stuff, I just decided, well, hell, I'll go see the chiropractor. Still not having a diagnosis. I went to a chiropractor who did help me a lot, just basically helped me understand that anything and everything I was trying to do to my body, hot tubs, massages, yoga even, was really causing my nerves further damage. And he said, you just have to stop everything and let's just stop. Because he couldn't even treat me. I was unable to be treated for so long because even just him touching my back was just a problem. It was that much on fire. So anyway, after I went into chiropractics, I also found my integrative medicine doctor. So this is 5 years into my journey. They did a lot of blood work, which is getting to that root cause, and which I love. You talk a lot about root causes. They discovered chronic EBV, which my body was not ridding itself of. And that's a series of tests that you can get done. And so I started IV drips, immune boosting drips. I started a ton of supplements. I just started working on my immune health, and I was in bad shape. I actually rented another condo. I rented a condo, Dr. Rawls, about an hour and a half out of town. just to sleep.
Yeah.
I could not calm myself
For
down.
years, it was,
Running
yeah,
around like
I
a
know
crazy
about that.
person. And I was
Yeah,
very,
for
very
years, I had
distressing.
to sleep in a separate room from my wife. It was really frustrating. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I know what you
Yeah.
mean.
You just you hit that point where you think I'm no good to anybody right now. I'm keeping everybody awake. I'm tossing and turning. I actually would go through a series of bed sheets because my feet turned so much in the bed that would rip holes in the bottom where my feet were. But as a result of the integrative medicine doctor, Dr. Reed, who is in Santa Monica, she said, I started seeing improvement. I started seeing for the first time some improvement in my life, in my lifestyle. I noticed some of my symptoms were dying down, but I couldn't get rid of these painful lumps under the skin. So she sent me to the John Wayne Cancer Institute to get body scans and everything. And another 2 weeks of waiting on those results. But my doctor came back and he said, listen, you're fine. There's none of this is cancerous. He said, but have you ever had a Lyme disease test? And I looked at him because I had heard of a Lyme disease test, but then everything that I was doing in terms of research was showing me everything was about 50% definitive. And I thought it would make me go more crazy, not knowing, was it worth spending thousands on a test and then at the end of the day not even knowing. So how do you stand on Lyme disease tests? If you have a patient that has a lot of pain and a lot of symptoms, and you've done some blood work, do you go ahead and do the Lyme disease test, or do you sometimes just do deductive reasoning and say it's probably, if everything's negative, it might be Lyme disease?
Yeah, different things in different parts of my practice. I did a lot of testing at one point. At one point, I was trying to be more like an integrative or functional medicine doctor. I was certified in holistic medicine. But I found that no matter how you look at it, testing across the board, whether you're looking at tests for autoimmune illness, for various microbes, for vitamins, a lot of our testing is fair at best. Even routine tests that we use in the doctor's office, you have to be really, really sick before those things really show anything. So testing can be misleading. And where I am now, it's like, yes, there are I can say with some confidence that every chronic illness has a microbe component. And here we're not talking about a microbe causing a disease. As I said, MS has been associated with a lot of different microbes. And I'm realizing that, when you talk about reactivation of microbes, there are just hundreds and hundreds of things that we pick up through our lifetime that cross over from our gut, from our sinuses, from our skin, then end up embedded inside of our cells. And we pick up things throughout our lifetime. So what we have the capacity to test for is like a drop in the bucket of the possibilities that are there. And it's never, anytime you're talking about a chronic infection, again, we talked about this in the beginning, an acute infection may be an infection with a microbe. But if you have a chronic illness of any kind, then what you have is a dysfunction of the ability of cells, the immune system, et cetera, to take care of itself, to manage that problem. So again, it's keeping these microbes dormant. And this idea that we can have, things that we pick up, Epstein-Barr, chlamydia, and literally hundreds and hundreds of other things become embedded in our tissues and our cells. There have been several studies from different places around the world looking at the blood, because blood is easy to get, blood of healthy people. And they found, in every case, they found dormant bacteria inside blood cells of every healthy person that they've tested. And here we're not talking about, okay, one or two. We're talking about hundreds of things that come from the gut, from the skin, from throughout the body. And there's even some thoughts that some of these things may actually be beneficial to our cells. We may need some of them. So that's where we don't know what's good and what's bad there. We just know there's a lot of stuff there. So it's more than the things that we're measuring for. We're really in our infancy as far as testing. And, it's like if we were able to take everybody in New England, a hot spot for Lyme disease, right? And pretty much most people have been bitten by ticks. So take anybody that had a history of possibly being bitten by a tick. And if we were able to chop them up and look inside all the cells in their body, I think we would find tick-borne microbes in virtually all of them. But if microbes are dormant inside cells, you won't test positive. So if you're healthy and you feel well, yes, you could be harboring Borrelia and Bartonella and Babesia and Epstein-Barr and everything else, but they're dormant inside your cells. Your cells are healthy. They keep right on working, so you don't have symptoms. It's only when they reactivate that they have problems. And once they reactivate, man, it's a pot boiling over. So this idea, we hear a lot about, well, we want to have good immune health. And I'm trying to change that and say, no, you want good cellular health. That's what it's all about. So we actually have several levels of defense. The first level is physical barriers, our skin, the lining of our gut to keep microbes in the gut. But things are constantly making their way across, or constantly making things their way into the bloodstream through tick bites and respiratory infections and everything else. So the second level is our immune system. But our immune system is the very most important with an acute infection with a brand new microbe, or just being there centuries posted to try to stem the flow of microbes that are coming across all the time. I mean, there are things that are crossing into our bloodstream right now, you and I, while we're talking. These things are happening. Our immune system is really important to clean those things up. But our third level of defense is our cells. Our cells can defend themselves. They can expel invasive microbes, or in some cases, if they can't do that, a survival mechanism of microbes is to go dormant. So we pick up these things, they invade our cells, they become dormant. So it's only when our cells become weak that these things reactivate. And at that point, you can imagine reactivation of these things in the muscle in your neck. Well, the immune system sees that and goes, oh, we've got all these microbes emerging from cells, and it attacks the cells. So in that way, the immune system can become kind of overloaded and work against you. Not only that, one thing that in my study is how microbes manipulate cytokines. They invade our white blood cells and manipulate the chemical messengers to basically disable the immune system. So our immune system is cellular, and our cells are part of our defense system. All of our cells have this ability. So our immune system becomes overloaded when cellular health is low. So if you bring up your cellular health, not just your immune cellular health, but your total cellular health, that's going to help take the load off the immune system. And that's how so that step, that drive to restore cellular health is so unbelievably important. And that's why, lifestyle things like just a good diet, stemming the flow of all the toxic substances that we're exposed to, and herbs do so much for cellular health that there is nothing on earth that you can take that comes close.
I agree with that. And primarily because until I had the Lyme disease diagnosis, I was really on this track of, and even for about a year after, I was on this track of killing that bacteria, killing it. I needed, what pill did I need to take? And it was frustrating for me because I wasn't used to, you get an antibiotic for anything you need, and I was just kind of so confused why there was nothing I could be taking. And after I beat my head against the wall for quite a bit of time, and really started getting to root causes with my integrative medicine doctor. That is when I turned the corner. And you talk about when you turn that corner and really saw, okay, I'm in this, and this is a journey, and maybe I'm not going to find it over there. Maybe it's not, I always say, maybe it's not outside my body. Maybe it's not some pill I need to take, or some other specialist that I'm missing, or traveling the world to find some magic cure. Maybe I'm going to turn inside, and I'm going to actually enable my body to heal itself. And so a lot of people will write to me and say, all these treatment plans are out of my reach. All these things are so expensive. And here I am, I'm just sick. I'm sick of my house. Well, I hear you, and, your opinions are validated. But quite frankly, when you look at the amount of money that people spend on hyperbaric and ozone and all these things, which are helpful, I'm not saying that they're not, for symptom control, those are really top dollar things that I, as a healed person 11 years later, never once did. The basic, as soon as I found out I had Lyme disease, I did 3 months of antibiotics, which is what my doctor wanted to do, oral antibiotics, and he rotated them until I was so sick that I couldn't take it any longer. Now, when I was sick with Lyme, I felt like I kept telling my husband, something's wrong with my DNA. There's something, that's what it felt like. There was something wrong. I wasn't coughing or sniffling, or I didn't have colds or anything like that. I just felt like my body was literally dying, but I didn't feel quote unquote sick in the way that you would think, you catch a virus. But the second I was on those antibiotics for 3 months, what did I do? I had a cough I couldn't get rid of. My nose was constantly running. I felt like I had a cold the entire time, like a hardcore cold that I couldn't get rid of. So I figured, okay, the antibiotics are not really doing their things. And I decided to go, into other means of health. And I'm so glad. That's about the time I found you. It's about the time I tried these little gems, which is your it's on my website for anybody who wants to go in to see what I actually took for Dr. Rawls. We don't really say Lyme recovery, but it is his protocol for that. And I'd like to tell you, after 9 doctors, antibiotics, and gabapentin, once I stopped all that, I'm going to tell you what I did to help myself heal my Lyme disease. And I bet you could pick out 1 or maybe 2 things that are on the quote unquote expensive side, but not debilitatingly expensive. But infrared blankets, infrared tents, anything infrared to sweat to get the toxins out. Take it with a binder if at all possible. Herbs, the herbal protocol. I use Dr. Rawls' Vital Plan herbal protocol. I have also used Dr. Cowden's herbal protocol. There are discounts for all of that on my website. I use naturopathic tinctures. So about 3 years ago, I had a tick attached to my body. And this was after all this hell I had been through. And I just like, you've got to be kidding me. But, I was at the lake, and I had figured it only had been attached for about 7 minutes. But sure enough, within about 48 hours, I started feeling really lousy. I knew I either had COVID or my Lyme, the symptoms were back with regard to a tick-borne illness. So I turned back into heavy duty, your herbal protocol, and I called Dr. Ingalls, and we used naturopathic tinctures in conjunction with your herbs, and he knew exactly what was in your herbs, and combined, because I didn't want any time to waste. I wanted to attack it aggressively, and those symptoms were fully gone within 6 months. I have used Rife. I have used magnetic field therapy. I have used red light. I have used supplements and still do. I still take herbs as a daily protocol just for prevention. I have used intermittent fasting, which has been huge for me with regard to symptom control.
Yeah.
I have used an ultra clean diet, which is no grains, no alcohol, no added sugar when I'm in the worst of shape. I can dip into some of those things nowadays if I would like to. But there were times where I was really on a very strict diet, to the point where I was only eating animal protein. And if I so much as had pepper on it, I would react. So I've done that. I have done brain retraining through the Primal Trust Academy. I've done fascia release, fascia release work, which basically means you meet with a fascia specialist, and it's a different kind of, I won't call it a massage, but it is a release of that, where you can lock traumas into your muscles, and your muscles still are tight. I've had lymphatic massage. I prefer the Brazilian method of lymphatic massage. I do foam rolling every single night. I do a CBD/THC salve or balm. If my feet are acting up, if I have some pains in my shoulders, if I'm having trouble sleeping, whatever it is, I'll put a little bit of that on the bottoms of my feet, lower back, or shoulders before bed, and that works within minutes. Magnesium bath salts I use more often than Epsom bath salts, and I am getting into sound frequency for healing. So you can see that there are so many things that I can do from my home that are wonderful, and that don't take a lot of thousands and thousands of dollars. And so when people say to me, I mean, how can I afford all this stuff? Basically, I say you don't have to. There are many things that you can do that are affordable. Do you want to talk a little bit about, the different ways of healing in terms of just finances?
Well, what I see in a lot of individuals is they're chasing things to try to get well, but they're not doing the things that are obviously going to help them the most. And because there's a certain amount of personal accountability there, to take control of your own recovery, which in my opinion is the only way to get well, takes on a responsibility, right? So if you go see a doctor somewhere and that doctor gives you therapy and it doesn't work, that doctor failed. But if you take that responsibility and you're doing things and it fails, then you failed. And there's a certain amount of guilt there. But it's something you just have to get beyond. And I was really, I was forced into that situation. And after a while, I kind of let my intuition carry me where I thought I needed to go. But I was a small town doctor who had this unusual thing, this illness. And I couldn't tell people that, because if you're sick, people won't come and see you. But I had to give up practicing obstetrics because of the call. I just couldn't do it anymore. I started a practice just that I called a wellness practice. It was basically gynecology and primary care. And I was figuring things out. And everything that I was figuring out, I was applying to help other people. Turned out that the office building, the only place that I could actually get to practice, because there was a shortage of office space, was an old building that was full of mold. So I learned all about mold. But I was financially constrained. I had 2 kids in college at that time. And I couldn't go off and see Lyme doctors and pursue all these things. And I reached a point where it's kind of like, no, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to figure this thing out. So if I couldn't bring it to me, and if it wasn't economically reasonable, I just couldn't do it. So I never did ozone, hyperbaric oxygen, any of those things. I never pursued, early on when I finally came around to figuring out it was Lyme disease, kind of like you did, I had had a test, it was negative, but I got what I call the second tick bite. As I had kind of given up on conventional medicine and I was doing lifestyle things, which was helping. But I got a tick bite and all the symptoms came back and I got a bullseye rash and it was like, oh yeah, that's what I had all along. There's no doubt about it. And then that's when I immediately started taking antibiotics. I had to talk a couple of providers to give me antibiotics because they didn't want to. And they just made me sicker and sicker. And it was at that point, out of just really desperation, that I turned to herbs. I was around 2005 when Stephen Booner's book, Healing Lyme, came out, and I embraced that protocol. And it was crazy. I mean, I was taking handfuls of herbs every single day, 2 or 3 times a day. But, and I started getting well. So that was a big step in the learning that, lifestyle mattered. Changing my diet, changing my lifestyle, giving up the night call, working on sleep, all of those things mattered. I lived with a lot of bad symptoms, like the heart symptoms and the burning feet. I was very afraid because, I'd had a cardiac cath. The doctor said, well, you can take these drugs, you might end up with a pacemaker, but otherwise we don't have much for you. And it was right after that I had the tick bite. And by then it was like, no, I'm not going back there. And the antibiotics, we talked about defense systems and, our levels of defense. First level is barriers, our skin, sinus membranes, all of these things that keep microbes out. Our second layer is our immune system. Our third layer is our cells. We discount that, but our cells are a really important part of our defense system. And our fourth layer is our normal flora, because we all have pathogens throughout our body, and the normal flora are suppressing those pathogens. They don't do it because they like us or they're our friends. They do it because they want to suppress the competition for the food. They want to get the food in the gut and on the skin, and they don't want that competition. Well, it just happens to work in our favor. So we let them have their space, and they keep those pathogens that are always there in check. Well, you kill your normal flora off if you take antibiotics for a long time. Antibiotics are great for fast-growing bacteria, like a pneumococcal pneumonia, or in war, like a bad skin infection. The antibiotics are life-saving. But you go any more than 10 days and you start chopping into your normal flora, and that's going to mess you up in the long run. So that's the advantage of the herbs, is they have antimicrobial properties, but you're talking about, it's a system, it's not one single chemical. When you take an herb, you're getting that plant's entire defense system and using it to support your own. Mm-hmm. So it's selective. It doesn't kill your normal flora. And that's actually been documented by scientific studies, that it suppresses pathogen, it promotes growth of normal flora. So it's protecting that very important fourth level of defense, where antibiotics don't. Antibiotics are cellular toxins. Herbs are cellular protectants. So they're protecting our cells, they're balancing our hormones, they're doing all the things that we need to heal. So I think for any illness, herbs should be your core. And so, because they're doing so much to really get you there.
Dr. Rawls, for anybody out there that wants to give your herbs a go, and they call and they get your herbal protocol, how long would you tell the person to give your herbs in order to be considered a fair shake, because some people might think, oh, I'm going to try it for a month, and if it doesn't work, I'm going to move on to something else. Or, is it what's a fair shake with a true person doing it 3 times a day and staying on it?
I think the word, assuming a person doesn't have unusual reactions to an herb in the mix, which is uncommon, but it can happen. So assuming they tolerate the herbal protocols, I think herbs will work for anyone if they give it enough time. And I always tell people, sometimes you have to work the herbs. I tell people this Restore Kit is your foundation, but it's okay to take other tinctures like you did and pull in other things into the mix that might accelerate your recovery. But we've actually looked at that question. We've had the Restore Kit out there for probably about 7 or 8 years. There have been well over 10,000 people that have used it. Periodically during that time, we've done surveys that we've tried to accumulate information. And they're questionnaires. And of course, not everybody's filling out the questionnaire, but we take blocks of people and encourage as many people as we can get to complete the questionnaire. And typically after 3 months, only about 30% of people have had a significant improvement in their symptoms. By 6 months, that goes up to 70%. That's great. I mean, there is no drug out there that's
amazing. Good. No drugs out there. No.
9 months, it's closer to 90%. So the longer people are on the herbs, the better response they get. So I always say, no matter what you're doing, take herbs. I mean, they're going to be so important in your recovery. And don't take some cheap product that's like $30 or $50 for one little bottle of tincture. You're just not getting the concentration of the chemistry that you need to make a difference. Cowden protocol is satisfactory. Ours, I think, there are things about ours that just make the whole process easier. But you need, I mean, it's not like one little bottle of tincture. It's a whole spectrum of things that you're going to be taking. It takes that. That's the only downside of it, the herbs. Again, when I was doing this, I was literally taking handfuls of capsules every day. So what makes the Restore Kit a little bit special, though, is we're using really high potency extracts. So our extracts are typically 10 times more concentrated than you find in the standard, and they're a lot more concentrated than a tincture. So one of our capsules might equal a couple of teaspoons of a tincture. And so you're just getting a lot of that phytochemistry concentrated, and that gets you there quicker, but that's what it takes with herbs.
And I might want to point out to everyone, so in his Restore Kit, there are 4 bottles, and you take each bottle 2 to 3, each bottle, you take 1 pill 2 to 3 times a day. But the great thing about what I like about your protocol is that it's so easy to carry them in your purse or wherever you need to go, take them to work. You don't get this stomach ache because you're not trying to, melt something under your tongue or anything. It's just a little capsule, and that's all it is. It's just making it a part of your daily routine, like clockwork, and you will see improvements. And he is right. There are so many, like, for instance, in one bottle, you might have 5 or 6 different herbs in conjunction with each other. So you're getting so much bang for the buck, as opposed to just going out and trying to just buy one by itself, like Japanese knotweed or something like that. You're getting so much that they do work. In my opinion, they're helping your cells regenerate. Instead of like an antibiotic, for me, it just was weakening that cell strength. So we're doing the opposite. And so anyway, I would just encourage anybody to try this. And I actually still do. I'll do like 1 or 2 NAD treatments per year, because that does also go directly to cellular wellness. And I love that. I love that cellular wellness as being that building block. And for all of us. So thank you so much for your wisdom. As you know, I'm fully healed now, and so are you. And I feel that we can offer something together to everyone out there who's in pain and who thinks that the answers are way outside of their scope. And when they're really not, they're right here. It's just a matter of you saying that your body is the medicine. And so let's help it out a little bit. So thank you, Dr. Rawls. Is there anything else you would like to tell our listeners today?
Well, just tacking on the things that you said, I think it's really important when you're evaluating therapies. I look at them and go, okay, is it just symptomatic? And early on, just like the medications you were talking about to ease the symptoms, that can be valuable. Or is it reducing cellular stress and actually enhancing cellular wellness, which is really the key to getting well? The herbs are the core of that. You have to do your part by eating eating a really clean diet, shielding yourself from all the environmental toxins out there, getting sleep. All of those things are important. Beyond that, looking at things, well, do they have value? Is it worth the expense? So do the obvious things first. Do the things that you need to do, the herbs, the diet, all of those things, and that may be all you need. But beyond that, if you want to accelerate it, ask that question, well, how is it working? How is it actually enhancing cellular wellness? And that's just not killing the microbes. And it's like things like ozone and hyperbaric oxygen, they can accelerate your recovery. But I find that people benefit from that. But if they're not doing those core things, they don't benefit as much. So it's like, what is it doing? Well, I think what we're doing with oxygen therapies is we're killing weak cells in the body that have been invaded by microbes. So it helps with that clearing. So it can accelerate recovery, but it can damage healthy cells too. So you have to be careful about that. You can't just do it over and over and over again. So any therapy, early on, you had benefit from intravenous nutrient therapies. Well, that was boosting cellular wellness. That was getting you where you needed to be. And that kind of gave you a foot in the door. So a lot of things are valuable, but you can pay a lot of money and not get well because you're overlooking those core things that are so remarkably important.
Very, very well said. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Rawls. I know I'll see you again soon, and all the best to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Okay. And you can find Dr. Rawls at Vital Plan on the internet, on the web, where he offers free webinars, and his book is available there, and just a host of other. I love your content, Dr. Rawls. It is one-stop shopping. That's all I'll say. You get so many wonderful things coming into your inbox whenever you register for his newsletter and his daily things that come into your inbox, and also his books are available and his protocol. So thanks again, Dr. Rawls. We look forward to seeing you.
Thank you, Allie.
Okay.